Okay, all right. I think we're in business. Okay, so Salt Lake City Transportation Division about a year and a half ago reached out to us to see if we would help them conduct this technical analysis of the Rio Grande Plan. Our purpose was to identify, and we'll emphasize in very general terms, not an in-depth detailed engineering analysis, but very much a high-level screening, but a technical focused analysis to identify what some of those key issues are, some of the concept refinement from what was originally proposed, considering some design criteria, grade, horizontal, vertical criteria for the railroad and Union Pacific, et cetera. So we conducted this analysis and led to development of what the primary design criteria would be, identified a conceptual alignment that refined a bit what the Rio Grande Plan had done. We reached out to agency stakeholders, UTA, Union Pacific, Salt Lake City Public Utilities, et cetera, to get their input as to what the primary constraints that they would view to implement this plan. We identified what the primary benefits and constraints would be, as well as they developed a planning level cost estimate for the concept. And then we have some exhibits. I'm sure you've all read in depth our report with cross sections that show the limits of the project, the width, height, impacts utilities, and then also work with Salt Lake City RDA to do an estimate of what the redevelopment potential would be as part of opening up the available land. The purpose of the Rio Grande Plan, originally as published, are stated here. Number one, improve east-west mobility. We know that that's an issue. Salt Lake City is working on that. They have some upcoming projects to help address that, not only through this potential project, but identifying a variety of improvements, whether it's grade crossings, enhancements to transit, active transportation, connectivity, et cetera, trying to bridge that east-west barrier that can be I-15 and the Union Pacific Railroad. Another big purpose of this, if you've looked at the data, the number of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries is some of the at-grade crossings because of people trying to cross. They get impatient, they don't see the trains, and there's been some fairly catastrophic fatalities over the past few years, and that we seek to address, whether it's through this type of a project or other improvements that Salt Lake City will be considering through upcoming grant they received called the Reconnecting Communities Grant. As you are aware, the Rio Grande Plan did propose to what we call train box the Union Pacific and FrontRunner Railroad. And this is an exhibit from that Rio Grande Plan, starting approximately at 9 South, where the railroad takes a bend, entering the greenery district, et cetera, then approximately along 500 West. And then this, the Rio Grande Plan exhibit went to, I believe it was about 300 North, if I recall.
Yeah, it remained below grade until about 100 South, and it rose up to meet at North Temple, so North Temple Station didn't have to be altered. Okay. The idea was to not interfere with east-west freight traffic.
Yeah, and so our analysis actually extended those limits a bit based on UTA and Union Pacific design criteria. So we go from about 1300 South to 600 North. So adding north and south, but that is to accommodate some of those other design criteria that the Union Pacific would require. You can see some of the new benefits here. A key component of the Rio Grande Plan is to revitalize or enhance the importance of the Rio Grande Station as a central transfer point between light rail, FrontRunner, transit, et cetera, and really restore that to its previous glory and heritage. This is another close-up of what that Rio Grande Plan. You can see the historic rail corridor that we yanked out several years ago in the black, And then the pink is, the current, Union Pacific and FrontRunner corridor. And the Rio Grande Plan would largely restore the railroad back to its, original historic alignment.
Well, which street is that black on?
About 500 west.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just west of the Rio Grande Depot right here, so it's the block west there.
Proposed train box.
And that's where the proposed train
I
box.
actually didn't know that those existed, right? Got it through the years.
Okay. It was before I was born also.
Okay.
So, long time ago. Some of the example projects where they've done this before is identified both in the Rio Grande Plan, and we did some follow-up example projects. People often cite the trade box in Reno, Nevada, which undergrounded the railroad. There's also a similar concept in in California, Southern California.
Alameda corridor.
Alameda corridor, I was saying Los Alamos, but the Alameda corridor. And then if many of you have been to Denver, you've also seen that they had an investment there with their Union Station. So there's examples of how this has been done. Many of you cited in California how they took out a freeway, also kind of contributing to that reconnecting the communities. Purpose really is to bridge the divide that our freeways and major railroad corridors can provide. Put up a wall essentially that is very difficult to permeate. A little bit more about what the existing conditions are on 500 West, where this corridor would be restored to. You can see there we have 4 unsignalized intersections. We divided the corridor into two segments: a north segment and a south segment, roughly divided there at the Rio Grande. So unsignalized intersections 9, signalized intersections 4. We have residential access points 16 along the length of the corridor, commercial access points 35 along the corridor. At-grade railroad crossings have 11, and then 8 overpasses or bridges. These all need to be considered. It's just not as easy as digging a big hole and putting the railroad underground. We still have businesses that, how do we accommodate? They've been constructed with their frontage to 500 West. Unless we're looking to redefine those configurations, which is quite difficult. We need to figure out how to accommodate the access to them as well. This is an overview of the north and south segments. You can see the pink highlight is what our the pink was the original train box limits. The orange is our extension to account for mostly the horizontal or the vertical grade that needs to happen to be able to get a railroad up at the 1.1% grade, 1.5% grade that is required by the Union Pacific, so they can continue their freight movements, et cetera. You can see some of the other symbols there, the at-grade crossings, bridges, existing major access points, existing signalized intersections. We also have that for the south segment. Another consideration that we needed to accommodate is the train box would not just extend to the north, but it actually would extend to the west because of our spur line that is headed out just south of North Temple, accommodating freight traffic there. So you can see that pink it is undergrounding to there, and then we come up grade there where that orange line is showing. We work with UTA and Union Pacific on design criteria. This is a summary. Recognize this may not be of interest, to everyone, but it certainly is important to the design. I think the most important design criteria here is you can look at that minimum depth of train box. That is to provide vertical clearance underneath any at-grade crossings. We're at 38.25 feet. And that allows for freight and the Union Pacific and UTA Railroad to go underneath any vertical or any horizontal crossings Tried to keep the horizontal crossings basically flat with the existing street system, so we didn't have to go up and over. So you minimize the impact to the adjacent land. So it's basically straight across. If we can get the train boxes to that depth, then we don't have to go over. We can just go under with the train box.
Another key component I'll add to that depth is utilities in the area. That was a major, when we talked with Salt Lake City Public Utilities, there's some really old, large sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, all sorts of things crossing there. And you just need to get deeper than those. They're still gonna probably be in the train box where it never be built, but you just need to allow for enough clearance, so that pushed it deeper than probably originally thought as well.
And we'll show you some exhibits that illustrate those utility solutions. When we met with UTA, they are in a process of double tracking FrontRunner throughout the entire system, and they want to maintain double track through this segment. We also need to provide spacing between those UTA tracks, as well as spacing between the UTA tracks and the Union Pacific tracks. We have been, the train box was designed consistent with those requested criteria. We certainly recognize that as this gets into detailed design and a higher level of concept design, there would be some give and take that we would work with Union Pacific and UTA to see if we can refine those design criteria. But for our purposes, we wanted to see what that impact would be if we were to do the train box at the design criteria as currently published by UTA and by the Union Pacific. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, we're gonna get into the concept a bit here, but I think this was a really important part of the process, was talking with the key stakeholders, Union Pacific, UTA, public utilities, and others, honestly, and just understanding any blind spots that we might have had when looking at this, and fully understanding just to make this happen, you have to satisfy a lot of requests. And like Brent said, were it to advance further, there would have to be concessions and compromise, but we wanted to just look at it as much as possible from the existing standards, the existing preferences from all the major stakeholders. What would it look like to make that happen? And that's what we really went forward with here.
So two things real quick. One, you did speak to Amtrak too, if I'm
Yes.
correct, and you actually had their own dedicated track in there. So what you're saying is basically, this is like the Ferrari version of the Rio Grande Plan. Like this is
The workhorse.
the workhorse. This will get everybody exactly where they want. If we had unlimited money, this is what we do.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Versus what could potentially come, which could bring costs down and so forth.
exactly. Yeah,
Got it.
exactly. Yes.
Just wanted to-
And there's all sorts of permutations, envelopes that you could say, can Amtrak and FrontRunner share a track, or can Amtrak and Union Pacific? We did receive the request to have separate facilities, minimize impact to their operations, and so that's what this impact analysis represents.
Right.
You mentioned the public utilities, like, the city of Salt Lake, sound like you're gonna be like kind of just digging under them. Was there any consideration to, I imagine like sewer is gonna be the one that has the most impact because of the way that it drains.
And storm drain.
Is there any consideration to just have it drain down to like 1300 south for the lift station down there, so you don't have to, so you just remove, kind of reconfigure the existing utilities? So I imagine you could shave a foot or two.
Yeah.
Go up and down.
Yeah, the thing with utilities is there's still services to be provided along the corridor, so it's very difficult just to reroute and remove. And when you start relocating utilities, you're also chasing back, it's not just in the impact area of the corridor, it takes, you're gonna have to go back to connection points and things like that. So as they get into utility design, there could be some of that, but we also wanted to,
Case scenario.
yeah, exactly. And I wanted to really understand what those impacts were, but try and minimize impacts to existing utility infrastructure. Salt Lake City has a lot of old infrastructure, with those storm drains and pipes, et cetera, that would have to be further investigated and much greater detail to identify those opportunities. Also trying to minimize new pump stations, things like that for ongoing operations costs. We don't want to introduce new new operations costs of Salt Lake City Public Utilities, and then get into who pays for that, you know, and who maintains that infrastructure.
That makes sense.
You know how the big dig in Boston and Seattle, how did they do their utilities?
I'm not as familiar, I just know it costs a lot, you know, on those projects, but yeah.
That's what I'm wondering, how they dealt with all this
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't have familiarity with those.
I hate to grant this concern, it's already brought up with the current point, but have you foreseen any water table issues with
Any what?
water table issues with the train locks that deep?
Absolutely, yep. Yeah, and we did, you know, I can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big thing that came up, talking with public utilities and other people just with the city that are familiar with the area, how high the water table is. And even when you're going 40 feet deep, even if it's not, you're still gonna get into the water table. And there is a big concern of creating essentially an underground dam for the way the water flows naturally under the city. We just did not, and as part of this, that's pretty clearly listed like in items not fully estimated. But that's part of why the range of the cost is so much, because like dewatering, like you would probably have to do in a structure like that, was something we thought about a lot.
Like groundwater injection.
Yeah,
I'm a water wastewater control system guy. So
Oh, great.
Yeah.
You should design the sport.
Well, I'm happy to like, I've worked on, a lot of projects, so.
Yeah. Okay.
So we see a similar issue of, say, you were to bury 300 West, right? For the entertainment district like they want to, they would run into a very similar issue because they probably have to go down the same distance. You could see potentially the same. issue.
Yeah, not nearly as much. Their limits would be a lot shorter because they're only going underneath one block. Vehicle vertical profile criteria are much steeper. You can go a lot steeper with a vehicle than you can with a train.
Gotcha.
So right now, what is it, 200 West goes underneath the Salt Palace right now. So I would envision,
something more similar to that,
yeah, kind of a down and up instead of down and.
prolonged.
Yeah.
Was there any criteria or limitations or cost implications for like hazardous material transport and confined space?
Yeah,
Items undefined.
it was brought up by Union Pacific. It was a concern. There was a lot of concern of just like, even if they were to store their trains like they currently do in the box, what like the exhaust implications would be in a structure. You know, you've got like hot exhaust coming from these trains. Can they actually stay underground for prolonged periods and not cause problems to the structure? As well as hazmat, like what would be the plan of if you were to move hazmat through the train box? What would be the cleanup protocol? It's not defined, but it was things that we discussed with Union Pacific, and it added to their skepticism and their kind of, concern for whether they were open to putting Union Pacific through this.
I don't mean to belabor, hold on, but they already have a 10-mile one in LA. So,
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, part of it too is that you're sharing it with passenger rail. The Alameda corridor is, as far as I understand, it's only freight. Oh.
And it's and you may be more familiar, but it's generally open, it's not capped. It has crossings.
It does that, yeah, it's sort of open, but it's also capped in some places, same as Reno's.
Yeah.
Same story, and Reno's does have good trains.
Was there a question on the call? From somebody online?
Maybe some background on this.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So getting through some more of the Union Pacific design criteria, they did request.
Brent, let me just ask, if anybody does have a question or a comment online, if you wouldn't mind using your raise hand feature, then we can monitor that and invite you to unmute and ask a question or comment. Sorry, Brent.
Yep, not a problem. So you can see here is the design criteria from the Union Pacific. They are requesting at least 2 tracks, and they are in, their desired is 3, so they have a room for additional capacity. And then you can see there the maximum grade for Union Pacific, 1%, based on discussions with them, design speed of 45 miles per hour, which all leads into the horizontal and vertical curve requirements. You want to go through cross sections?
Sure. I mean, I have.
You want to come along there?
Yeah.
So we're gonna shift to Theo, and he's gonna walk us up and down the corridor. We have a roll plot map. We didn't know if there would be more people online or in person and how many people would be there, so we brought a roll plot that certainly if you're wanting to look at it on paper format, we can lay that out.
Probably right here.
Yeah, and then
Sorry.
Theo's gonna walk through the
And unfortunately, our plotter had a midway through it lost some.
a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's easier just to call somebody and have them plot it out, right?
So it'd be way down over there.
Okay.
So Theo's gonna share his screen, so we wanna make sure we don't lose the online folks, walking through this, so we'll continue,
Yeah, let's start on the south side, which should be over here. Yeah, sorry, north is to the left on this plot. So again, like Brent was saying, Union Pacific, I think the profile in there actually shows 1.5%, but that was revised to 1%, which was a big contribution to the extension further south to past 1300 South. Unfortunately, that's the part where the plotter, so you guys can look here to kind of see the dark portion is open. Open train box. Tried to maximize that as much as possible, just mostly for ventilation reasons. This is the less interesting section, but I can show you really quickly. The alignments, the two red are UTA FrontRunner, the purple is Amtrak, the two pink solid are Union Pacific, and the dashed pink is future Union Pacific. So in total, 6 track.
those are center lines.
Those are center lines of the track. And you can see that one of the more strict criteria that Union Pacific requests is distance from third-party rail. So you can see the distance between Amtrak and Union Pacific is the largest there. And that's even what we show here is below what is their desirable amount, which is 50 feet. But 25 is something that they have in urban areas. So we thought it was fair that we would show that because 50 just simply wouldn't.
Well, you could
Go
put
ahead.
the future in the middle or something, so then it has 50 feet, and if they want to go down.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's, I don't know, I just, sorry. And that's their, and that's their. And that's obviously their desirable, are you seeing the research that there have been exceptions made for their?
Yeah. In existing, they have exceptions to that. Like we were saying, I think those come down to case by case, discussing with them. But they wanted it to be clear what their desirable criteria is, and that's what we have shown on the table. Anyways,
Are your blue lines intended to stay rail right away, or is that?
this doesn't show right of way takes. There are sections that go beyond existing rail, for sure. But for the most part here, with the exception of a few small parking lots, it works mostly in rail right of way. But it is very wide. So as we go through here, this is kind of the first pinch point. Is that underpass under I-15. We didn't look super closely at what kind of reconstruction work would have to be done there, but definitely something would have to be done to accommodate that. Again, it is going down at this point, so there is a bit of clearance. Anyways, it was just something that we,
It's the width of the.
Yeah.
The abutments.
Of the abutments, yeah, but you could theoretically, right, again, this goes into, general versus specific, you could start with the box being smaller, and a separate
Narrow.
I-15 revitalization could expand the
Right.
box, right?
so as it approaches 500 West, we have some substantial property impacts here. Which again are not really shown on this plot. There was just a lot to layer in, so I thought keep it as simple as possible. And this line right here does indicate where it's full depth. This blue line, so this is where it kind of starts going down.
That's that one.
This is where it's deep enough to be covered, but it's not covered in this section, and then this is when it's full depth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as we get into this section, you can see that lighter hatch, that white indicates at grade. like road grade. So these are kind of those intersection caps we were describing. They would have to go over the box. And as we advance this, we wanted to maximize again the amount of ventilation. So you can see kind of the tracks are shown through that roadway cap as we go through here. But yeah, each one of these would have to be reconstructed, similar to how they are on the Alameda corridor. We looked at that really closely of the way that they had those intersection caps.
And it's kind of similar to Reno, I assume as well.
And these callouts are just kind of drawing attention to some of the bigger utilities that are crossing in the area.
Are those two intersections 8 and 900 south?
Yeah, 900, 800, 700 south.
So maybe pause, zoom in on that cross section.
Oh, yeah.
It was to kind of focus on.
So real quick, so that actually opens up, so 700 doesn't actually go over the tracks right now. So that creates a brand new intersection and connectivity between these all sides.
So yeah, this is it's not a specific cross section at any point. It's kind of just general of what this kind of section would look like at the full depth. You can see there on the darker blue is kind of the roadway envelope of where we would keep existing traffic movements off 500 west. That dashed section in the middle is where it would be open air. We don't have it shown in the plot here, but it would have intermittent supports similar to Alameda to just structurally keep it stable. So it's not completely open air. It has pretty consistent beams across it that we wanted to kind of illustrate here. And then it really is less of a single train box and more of 2 train boxes side by side. The span is just too large to have a single box. So we have a large support there in the middle. And this generally shows again, the 2 UTA tracks, the Amtrak, separated by, in some cases, a solid wall, but other cases it would be open. And then the 3 Union Pacific tracks on this side, as well as space for servicing their tracks, get vehicles down there. And then right here, as we were kind of mentioning, we have what's called a utility chase, 6 feet. It's assumed that the large utilities that would need to span across the box would go through this section. They'd be put into pipes if they're not already, because there are some spots with like brick sewer, really old brick sewer that would have to be completely reconstructed and put across the box.
And that'll probably need to be reconstructed anyway in the next few years. So the Rio Grande Plan is again a project that takes care of a lot of things for the city.
Yeah, and we wanted to add just an additional buffer of 2 feet. So in total, there's 8 feet of room for utilities to span across the box.
Or how wide is this box? It's 120?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Across?
Span.
Wide enough to turn around like a carriage or
That's where it's at criteria.
This is always around, that's why I'm asking, it's a big box.
It's very big.
That's why I'm asking.
You wanna see it?
Yeah, I'll find that.
It does.
It varies quite a bit. You'll see it gets even wider. This is actually at its narrowest
Oh,
thing. Or at least it's definitely not the widest.
The station is worth watching.
Yeah. So right here, we'll draw attention in the plan view. This is the first concrete, because a lot of this is currently underdeveloped. Not to say that there's not businesses operating here, there are, but the largest, the first big existing development is here with industry.
Yep.
And that was one that we didn't quite know what that would look like, because it is in the footprint. You can see it gets a little narrower here, and that would just require further design revision to see what you would do with some of these existing apartment buildings, commercial buildings. It gets more as you get closer to Gateway, et cetera. Continuing north.
We vary from 125 feet to 200. And again, as we've emphasized, that can be optimized once we get into detailed discussions with UP and UT.
Would that be the largest box or in transit?
In the country,
I don't know, I would think so.
I would think so. There's a lot in that box. Alameda and Reno don't have that much in there. So Big Dig, I don't know how wide that is. Is it? Okay.
Wanted to draw attention to these existing freeway entrances and exits. I know the Rio Grande Plan did identify those as, reconstruction, like convert them to be at-grade entrances to the freeways. We, as part of this project, it just was outside of what we were looking at with the main line. So the assumption here is that they would stay as they are, but there's always the option that, because that's just a whole added, that's completely different project, yeah. So that does add a little bit of complexity with these intersection caps, because if you guys can picture where this is, they're already getting elevation basically right here. So it's just a little trickier, but continuing north, to the station area. I'll go to that cross section, which you have on this flyer as well. This is again the widest section. Just to allow for the platform, a center platform between both UTA tracks. That went through a series of iterations with UTA of what they theoretically would want to see between the tracks. Again, we had some spots where we thought maybe outside platforms would work, but just considering the vertical circulation, we thought just a wide center platform would be the best. You can see Amtrak as well has a platform that is split between the UPRR tracks and the Amtrak track.
That's optimal. If we increase passenger capacity, then we could use the UP track.
Right, and one thing that did come up when we were discussing whether Amtrak could share UTA's track is like the platforms themselves are different heights.
And their signaling is different.
Yeah, so. Any questions at this?
So
With this
so
cross section?
Amtrak has they would just cross over the UTA track to board, or how would they board Amtrak? If they didn't use the UTA track?
Yeah, it would either, whether they figure out vertical circulation elevators, bringing them down, or at grade, like grade crossings in the track itself.
Amtrak is, but the Amtrak is gonna be loading and unloading at the station.
Yeah, but it does have its own platform.
This part,
Mhm.
oh, so this one, well.
Right, that one.
Okay. Where the wall may not, and the original.
They're in
Got it, okay, all right, so I see.
We'll let people have 2 feet to.
Yeah, I was like.
If I made the original Rio Grande Plan proposed elevators and escalators to both of them, so they could be above ground and then go down rather than cross over like they currently do in Salt Lake Central, which poses a danger to pedestrians.
Right. So let's look at this in plan view. You can kind of see there the platform width. It's not showing what is covered by the road, so there's other things going on here, but yeah. You can see because of the kind of the turns that have to happen through here, it's not centered on the Rio Grande Depot exactly, but that would go through further revisions. As we go north, this is where we definitely get into the most impactful existing infrastructure and just development with all of the apartments at the gateway and surrounding areas. And it was a tricky one to think through of like, that's now become a really attractive linear park. And how do there's just no way to build this without eliminating that. But we're showing here a full cap through this section, both for noise reasons and just like to be able to put back that linear park, what was there. This is definitely would need further looking at like the foundations of those buildings, how deep those are, how close they are to what we're proposing, etc. Keep going here.
And then just show the you have to disconnection.
Yeah. And this is that connection to the west that needs to be maintained.
And as well as just the crossover, are those businesses or are those apartments as well?
Right here,
Yeah,
this is businesses. I think it's a storage unit. This is the historic, this is a historic spur right here. You can actually see it. Not in this, but if you were to look, the building curves a bit. And it's really the only option would be eliminating these businesses to some degree or modifying them to get this to.
It's not knocking out, is that the Beverly or those 4 residential?
Yeah, I mean, oh, with this, it's not knocking them down.
Yeah, okay,
just these ones, the complex, I believe,
If I remember, it is a complex, and also there's a storage unit, I think, in there, like a
right
storage.
here.
But if I remember correctly, from reading, there's no demolishing or, I mean, there's impact of residential, but there's no demolishing of residential units.
So,
Right, only, I think these are the only two buildings that need to be eliminated.
there may be a few small ones over on the south end, but yeah.
Yeah.
Minimizing that as much as possible. So going to the west, I'll really quickly, sorry, the profile gets in here, but something we did realize as it's coming out of that trench, you no longer get the clearance that you need, so they'd have to actually build viaducts at 800 west, 900 west. And this one is able to be at grade, but that adds another, complexity to it, that this isn't at grade because the train's coming out of the box. It actually has to be
Up and over.
up and over.
Same thing that happens at 300 and
Mhm.
Forest.
Well, it's
Almost
not
crossing
using
the
those spaces now, so.
Currently.
Right.
Yeah. it's still-
I turn around. Most people just, I bike back and forth between all those, it's bad.
Because those are at grade crossing the front line for west.
Yeah.
Plus, with the power district going in there, it'll be good to have an easy access over.
And the last kind of big thing to talk about here is we had a lot of discussions with UTA about what to do with North Temple, both with its proximity to the new station. Cause it does by making this a straight line, become quite a bit closer. And
Yeah.
just like would there be a need for a North Temple station? And that was on the table as well, but we, for the purposes of this, decided to show where it would need to be relocated, were they to keep it. Because at this point, it starts exiting, you can't have the station on the grade, so it would have to be relocated fully underground, so you'd now have two fully underground stations. If they were to keep both of
A
them.
block from each other.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in reality, once you look at the new light rail, the orange line and tech link corridor, things like that, you have a much expanded Rio Grande. The reason they have two,
It's the airport. Yeah.
well, they felt like the demand at each of those stations, they needed to distribute the demand. And now you get a much larger facility that can be able to handle it. So you could hopefully potentially, consolidate those stations into a single station.
My personal opinion, you should. right?
Mhm.
So North Temple does not become an at grade crossing, like does not lose its viaduct.
No,
Keep that on. That one really sucks. As a pedestrian walking, like you just,
There's always the potential to change that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
now
but-
they're-
no, you're trying to minimum viable product.
Happens to the solid central. Just go away.
yes,
It moves to the Rio
It
Grande.
moves Rio Grande Station, yeah.
Did you look at Sixth West at all? I mean, I know the point is to get.
As an alignment?
Yeah, I mean, it avoids a couple of these.
Yeah, we focused on what the original Rio Grande and getting it to 500 West is where the Rio Grande Station is. Emphasize.
and I'll just end this here showing again, as it's coming out near which this aerial's out of date, more finished apartment buildings. It's just getting more and more constrained as time goes on, but it does fit within the existing rail right of way with some roadway reconfigurations and these new viaducts at 400 north and 300 north. And then it continues this way.
So I had a question.
Uh-huh.
You're assuming a uniform, from what I understand, you're assuming a uniform ground, right? When in reality, it's kind of going, there's a bit of change in the topography
Yeah.
as we go along.
Yeah.
So could it be possible that, and I know it's general, right, general specific, that actually gets brought back a little bit more or pushed out?
Yeah, we don't have survey, we had to assume a
So you're
uniform.
assuming uniform, because we don't have certain, got it.
Exactly.
How tall are the viaducts on 300 north and 400 west, or 300 north, 400 north? Like not like North Temple size, or are they gonna be pretty?
They're just tall enough to get the 38.2 foot, like the required clearance. I don't know.
But it's already on its way back.
Exactly.
So it's gonna be kind of.
Split the difference.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's why you can see like 400 north, it's quite a bit longer and probably taller
Because
than
it's
the one at
closer
300 north,
Above grade.
because the train is higher at that
Yeah,
point.
no, that makes sense. It's,
Yeah.
it's great for cars, but for pedestrians, it's not.
Yeah.
Overall, I think
Being
it's
that way for pedestrians.
well, and it could always change, right?
Yeah.
But this is preliminary. Can't be too big.
Well, yeah, I think.
So just be excited about it, right?
No, this is awesome. It's nice seeing it laid out.
This is awesome. I want this.
So I'll just wrap up. I know we had until 1 o'clock, right? Must, approximately. This is a summary of what those impacted parcels would, well, I just had it. How did I lose that? Summary of what those impacted parcels could be based on this evaluation. Full property acquisition, 65 parcels. Partial property acquisition, 66. Construction impacts, where you're getting right next to it, you have to do shoring or retaining walls, et cetera, during construction. You have that 76 parcels, and then demolition. 11 buildings total would be removed as part of this concept. The report identifies a variety of issues: rail coordination, continued coordination with Union Pacific, addressing access impacts. We have tried to bring the existing road system to provide access where it currently does. If there's redevelopment or reconfiguration of the business, that could be revisited and refined. Utilities will continue to need to be defined. Geotechnical, water table, environmental. There is railroad corridors aren't known for being ready to redevelop right of the way because of all the leaking tanks and 100 years of stuff. So that will certainly need to be considered. Also, the redeveloped parcels that open up as part of this may not be eligible for residential construction because of those same environmental constraints there. When UTA does divest or Union Pacific, there are often restrictions on ground floor residential. You can do potentially commercial or other uses, but ground floor residential is often not allowed because of the soil conditions. Structural, we did some initial structural. You can see that in our cross sections, but that would need to be further fleshed out. And then we did do an RDA economic assessment as part of the potential revenue that could be anticipated as part of the redevelopment. It's a fraction of what the cost would be. So need to be aware that this would not pay for itself immediately. There are often likely community benefits much wider than the direct increase in property taxes from the redeveloped parcels, but recognize that it would take a significant investment. And then there are all sorts of things we didn't look at, dewatering, or that we didn't cost. That's why, again, like Theo mentioned, the wide range of cost. So we have an estimate of $4 to $6 billion in total cost. 4 to 6 billion. Once it gets into the B's, it's hard to remember what those stand, or 3 to 5 in 20, yeah, 4 to 6 in future dollars. If you haven't seen our summary document, it's available on Salt Lake City's website, an overview one pager. And with that, it's 1 o'clock, so open to any questions, those who have amendments or
I can do a
able
quick
to
question.
go, so.
About the cost, so forth. I saw you had a 30% contingency. As a person who works in government contracting, most of our line items have an additional percentage on that. So is there an additional percentage that you guys put on each line item in addition to that 30% contingency?
We have a 30% contingencies to the summation of the construction costs.
Okay,
So
but nothing else on each line item?
not on each individual line
Okay.
item, yeah.
Sometimes, there's wrong items that go in. It depends on bid process. So
Yes. And as a concept is developed, 30% is quite large, especially when we're talking about a $4 billion project. As the next generation of concept design, you would hopefully reduce that contingency down to 5 or 8%.
Or what year was that 4 to 6 billion projected for?
10 years from last year, so 2030.
And it was 6 to 8.
6 to 8, no.
Ready for the Olympics.
I knew I could.
Percent contingency now.
Yeah.
Not always.
Exactly.
I think my biggest thought currently is just, obviously, we're doing a lot of redevelopment in Salt Lake, and the convention district, and then also the Rio Grande, and Heckling, is I'm hoping that even though this is very preliminary, that they're not going to do anything that will make this more difficult, but that they're also looking at, hey, how can we plan ahead for if this does go for it and make it easier?
Right.
Besides those things that happen.
Right, absolutely, and there's cognizant of that, there's redevelopment projects for the Rio Grande. Area now called, Rio Grande District, right here west. And there's the green loop, that is coming through this corridor that I think our concept is compatible, obviously, because it's underneath all of that, it just is cost that we would want to design how we can maintain both of those functions.
Has there been any public outreach, formal surveys, anything like that?
Not formal surveys, ours was a technical focused with agencies and city staff really understanding the issues. Our document does not take a formal position, whether it's should advance or should not, but it was issue identification as to what needs to be considered.
That's what the Reconnecting Communities grant is supposed to do.
Exactly. Yep.
They're going to,
Advance that.
and this is one of their options, but it's. As a citizen advocate for this project, the city is moving that slowly. We need to move faster if we're gonna get that.
So as part of your scope of work, you did not look at potential jobs created or local economic impact, not outside of the tax revenue?
No, not in terms of a full economic benefit. It was RDA has their process in terms of tax increment.
I just wanted to add off of a public comment. I mean, I know this is such in the beginning, but to move it faster, I just see a real NIMBYism issue on your hand. So, whatever type of public kind of involvement can happen, because, you say it's 0 residential buildings, but, people aren't gonna really hear that when you say you're demolishing 11 buildings. So it's just, so I imagine that's already a conversation that's being had, but the sooner that people can realize that this is what's happening with the next 10 years, the better, for everyone involved. Brent?
We do have a question online as well from Matthew Gibbons. Matthew, do you want to unmute and ask real quick?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the cost estimate. I noticed that I think it's the excavation was quoted at $15 per cubic foot, and I was just wondering what goes into that, because I think it makes up like $1 billion of the cost. And it just sounded like a lot for just digging the hole.
Yeah, I mean, I know I myself, I'm not a licensed engineer at this point, but I consulted with a lot of engineers that we have on staff to come up with something reasonable. A lot of them told me that excavating something of that volume is not something that's ever really happened locally. So it is a cost that's really hard to tie down. Understanding what the haul off of that kind of material, what type, like how much of it could be used elsewhere. It's a really tricky one. So I think on that one specifically, we probably were quite conservative with the unit cost, just simply because there's not really something to compare it to. And it is a huge volume that would have to be excavated and so I guess that's my best answer.
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking of the airport tunnel being kind of a similar but smaller version of this between the two terminals.
Do you know what that cost was? You have any idea?
I can't remember. I actually had an estimate for it at one point for the whole cost. I think one of our volunteers dug that up or grammar requested it or something. And if you multiply, what's funny, if you multiply the volume of that tunnel, or the ratio of the volume of that tunnel and our train box, it comes out to be about, I think, almost $3 billion. So it's kind of funny how it scales linearly like that.
So you're saying we're right on.
maybe a little, if we assume the world is linear, then you're a little over, but that's probably fair.
But we have buildings and utilities to address too, so.
They have
was
a
gonna say-
water problem though, have
Yeah.
more a water problem probably.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that Granite Construction on UDOT's US 89 project did a big dirt analysis and saved $7 million based on the geotag right and the earth around. So I'm sure that's a thing
Yeah.
that we could find out, especially if you looked at an alternative delivery process, like that one was a progressive design build, but my question was going to be about Union Pacific, because that to me feels like the biggest hurdle aside from the funding.
Because they have no incentive.
Well, it's my personal non-affiliated opinion that, no one has any control over anything Union Pacific does, so. We can't make them, I mean, they have rail everywhere and we are unable to make them do anything, right? I've seen on many civil projects. The project team has to pay a guy in the truck for 60 days or however long we're working within 100 feet of the rail, just to sit there and make sure they not, so like, I have seen very little to no flexibility in my career working in public civil projects with Union Pacific, so this would require a major
Yes.
sea change.
That's why we have excellent public engagement folks.
I'm not asking for that, I'm just curious, like, from early conversations with them, like, what is the inclination?
Yeah.
Because that seems like.
Well, I think the big hurdle is this increases cost because of the infrastructure. It doesn't provide them what they perceive as necessarily any operational benefits that they will stay to now. I think that it does, but we can get to that, but right now, their position is it does not benefit, therefore. Why, exactly, and then there's, you end up with a very large box that needs to be maintained, concrete eventually deteriorates, right, it has to be maintained. UTA isn't necessarily in the business of maintaining big concrete structures.
Responsibility and then they would want to do it.
Yeah, so there is governance issues, who is going to continue to pay for the maintenance of the. And then is ownership, who owns the box, if it's Union Pacific Corridor, do they own the land, but then they don't own the box, but then who takes care of the box?
Federal.
It's a federal.
Well, technically, I think the city owns the right of way of 500 West, so.
We do.
Then the city would own that part of it, and then I guess.
Well, yeah, and then are you paying UTA, then you're essentially buying UP out?
Yeah.
And then are you replacing, or are you just giving them rights, and are they wanting to give up right of way? Union Pacific has been around for 150 years, they'll be around for.
Long time.
More, so that's their core business, and Utah is a crossroads of the West, it's an important freight corridor.
And well, with the inland port expanding, I think we're gonna see more freight trains moving through downtown that are gonna be longer and, it's time, this has to be addressed. I think that, I wanna thank you guys for what you did. Moved this along pretty well in the city as well, and, but this is my meeting, this is your meeting.
Well, we probably ought to wrap up, maybe one more question, and then we've got a little bit of committee business to do, that for those that want to stick around for our committee business meeting. One more.
Okay, kind of slightly different direction, but looking at North Temple, there's the city folder. What's the plan for getting that under or just bypassing the train bar?
To be designed. Yeah.
So then my follow-up question was, at the depth the train box is gonna be, this is obviously a project that would outside the scope of this, but at the depth the train box is, do you see that as a potential opportunity to daylight City Creek possibly?
To daylight City Creek?
Yeah. have it-
Well, so we do have that 8 feet, that across a train box, it would be a big pipe or canal, but certainly
You wouldn't have to siphon it under, there's a potential, there's enough utility space you could have. run.
Yeah, well, I guess our envision is not going under, but we have that 8 feet that you would do a canal box, for City Creek. I don't have an opinion what they do east and west of there, but I'm always for environmental restoration.
And absolutely as just as possible, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank our guests for being here today and for bringing a lot of information. It's pretty dense. We did include an email, if you saw it, a link to the full report if you're interested in that. If you're not getting our emails and want to, drop me a card or send me a note. And I'm happy to add you to our urban design community. We communicate mostly through a Google group. And we share lots of information about our regular programs and other stuff that's going on. So thank you again for being with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the good work that you've done to help advance this idea.
Thank you. We need to figure out where to get via Rio Grande birds.
We're working on that. People, so a lot of people want these. We aren't exactly a nonprofit yet. We're just a bunch of volunteers. So
Genuine grassroots.
This is true grassroots.
Limited edition print, huh?
Yeah, we need to do like just a print and be like, it's just a cost, whatever, like just cover the cost, so that we're not making it a problem, we don't have to worry about it. But yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
And if anybody has any questions about volunteering and getting this moving forward, you can come talk to me.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you very much.